This next panel is about a subject that we all don't want to, probably not a fun topic, but a topic that is very relevant. Who here does social media for a company? Okay, wonderful. Who here has in some way, either whether it be a review or a tweet or a post, been attacked by a consumer? Okay. Okay, then this is going to be the panel for all of you. I'm going to welcome the panelists to the stage. Going to come on up. We need one, two, yep. Yeah, we can give them all a round of applause while they're sitting down. They'll be sharing information with us. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in more detail, but while we're getting seated, we have, and their Twitter names are all, the Twitter names are out there, so you can go ahead and give them a tweet. We've had that for the other panel too. So we have Rick Wion, he's one of our board members. He was just introduced the last panel and answered some questions. He's with the Kellogg company. We have Meredith Nichols, she's in reputation management at Sears. So she doesn't know anything about getting attacked by consumers. We have Dakota from Agency 360, and I can't wait for him to tell. It's one of my favorite hater stories about cats. And we don't hate cats. We love cats here at Digital Megaphone, but you'll hear more about it in a second. And then to bring in the legal perspective, my favorite attorney, Daliah Saper. So let's give them all an official big round of applause. Yeah. So we're gonna jump right in. So we're gonna have each of the panelists more formally introduce themselves, and then they are also going to tell you their most impactful hater story and how they handled it. And we could just get started and go down the row.
Start?
Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon now.
It's on.
All right, hi guys, my name is Daliah Saper. I have an IP media or social media entertainment and business law firm based out of Chicago, where we're going on 14 plus years. And a large part of my practice areas are around or focused on internet issues, which necessarily means we also regularly deal with online defamation. And I'm constantly working with corporate counsel or marketing professionals, and we're deciding, is this something we pursue legally when a hater attacks, or is it something that's better served from a PR marketing standpoint? Hater story, since I file so many of these defamation cases, inevitably people like to say terrible things about me on the internet. I have no story nothing shocks me anymore, let's put it that way. For example, one person created a fake Daliah Saper account and basically wrote terrible things about my client as if I was saying them about my client. Fortunately, they spelled my name with an H in the middle. My name is an H at the end. And it was so outrageous that it looked so fake that I wasn't worried. Obviously, I put some notes that said, this is not me, disregard. So that's one. And then there's another one, which was I don't want to monopolize the time, but another one where the defendant keeps posting every day. And from a legal standpoint, that makes it really difficult because we have this concept of no prior restraint on free speech. And I can get into it in more detail as we proceed. So.
Yeah, a cyborg now. So my name's Dakota Schultz. I am a founder of Agency 360. We're a full-service communications company. We do PR, social media, event production, sponsorship development, all that kind of stuff. But for purposes of today, there's a lot of kind of crossover, obviously, between what I'll call PR, public relations, media relations, and social media relations, right, if you want to call it that. As Hope alluded to, it's a funny story now, but as a quick show of hands, who has pets? Okay, if you have cats, leave your hands up. If you would admit to kind of being slightly obsessed by your relationship with your cat, leave your hands up still. Okay, so we all know people like this. So the short version of this is we have a client, Hawthorne Racecourse, which is on the southwest side. They've been there. It's a family-owned business, 110 years, right? So, nice story there. Very, very good people. The family runs the business. It's a race course, and it's been there, like I said, for over a century. There can be as many as 2,000 horses on the property at the time. So think of it really as a farm in an agribusiness kind of space, and the barns abut a waste management facility too. So as you could imagine, there are lots of cats. there's cats at every single racetrack in America. There always have been. There are crazy cat people too. So there was a woman who decided it was her obligation to take care of these wild feral cats. And the racetrack allowed it for a while, right? It's like, okay, you can come in, you can put out food, just kind of stay out of the way, right? Well, she kept getting more and more in the way, and it was really beginning to disrupt the business. And this is a business that is highly regulated too. We're kind of controlled by the Illinois Racing Board and the government and all that kind of stuff. So got to a point where we had to kind of say, you can't be back here in the ways that we've allowed you to be back here, where there's horses and tractors and trucks and all this kind of stuff any longer. She kept pushing the envelope. She once showed up with her child, right, which we had kind of said, absolutely not. Like, you can't have kids back here. It's just too dangerous. And, so she took this as us kicking her out of our facility, which she thought of as her facility to take care of her cats. So she went to the police and she filed a police report. And then she went online and she created an online petition saying, that she's no longer allowed to take care of her cats. And that furthermore, Hawthorne was killing these cats, right? Which now went totally crazy town. Blew up on social media. There were like 60,000 people worldwide within a few days that signed a petition kind of demanding that we allow this woman access to our private property to take care of her cats, which were wild cats, which weren't in danger. Because if you're a cat and you're, in these barns next to Waste Management, there's food everywhere. Like you can't catch a mouse there. You probably shouldn't be a cat. So next thing happens is, new Facebook groups pop up. That at the time, this was 5 years ago, which I didn't realize so much time had passed. So Facebook was a totally different environment then, and candidly, Hawthorne wasn't that active on social. So the amount of people that joined these other groups really kind of rivaled our own audience size online, not to mention the 60,000 people that had signed this petition, which included contact information, not just for the PR relations at the track, but all of management for the Illinois Racing Board, the governor, the mayor, police, you name it. Here was phone numbers, email addresses. So at one point, we were getting thousands of emails a day and had to create a special email address just to handle the influx of this kind of stuff. And we were putting out, statements, of course, and Q&A and all that. But then the media picked it up very quickly and said, well, we have to come and cover this thing because it's online, it's a social thing, and that's what we're gonna cover, right? They weren't actually as concerned about the news of what was happening or not, but that it had so much buzz on Facebook, we have to cover this kind of thing, right? So I'll probably get into some more of it later, but the end of it was lots of partnerships on our part to bring in other experts within the, Paws Chicago, a Treehouse, to say, no, Hawthorne is really doing everything right here. The cats are okay. They never were not okay, right? And, eventually kind of dilute the volume that this woman was creating. But something that struck me, and I didn't talk with any of you guys about this before, and I was looking this back up. You know how Facebook now will give you reminders of hey, 5 years ago on this day, right? So I saw that this crazy cat woman started posting again because she got a reminder from Facebook, and she was like, I'm actually still really mad about this, And it was just so funny that the initial response, got so much, we had death threats. The owners of the racetrack, their personal information was put out online. We had to make these police reports. We had, staff at Hawthorne that had to shut down their own personal media accounts, kind of like what you were talking about, where they were getting targeted. It was just outlandish. We got to protect these cats.
The animal activist community is very intense.
We had experts from that community come to us privately and say, get ready, because these people are crazy town, and they're gonna, so it's these were champions of that world saying, don't envy the position that you guys are in, right? So thankfully, the reminder that she got from Facebook wasn't nearly as inflammatory and didn't start it all up again, but I thought, gosh, there's just technology won't let you forget that at one point you were aggrieved by something, and here we go again. So there's a lot more to that, and we'll probably get into it more later, but man, meow.
My name is Carolyn Rooke. I work for Digitas. I currently work across the Kimberly-Clark account, but in the almost 10 years that I've been a community manager, I've worked across food, I've worked across CPG, retail, personal care, sports, so I've touched a lot of different industries. And I feel like I need to give a cat story now, so I can give a really quick cat anecdote. So in a past life when I was working on a food brand, we got someone who wrote on our Facebook page, "I just really love the taste of your wet cat food. I know I'm not supposed to, but it's really good on French fries." And it was just one of those like WTF posts that you get, and I actually cut it out and hung it on my desk as a reminder of, you know, the mission that I serve is answering these people. And I had to wonder, you know, how many different combos had she tried to get to the French fry pairing? But yeah, that's my cat story.
I'll take that one.
Yeah,
Instead
that's,
of-
I don't know, am I on here? Yes.
Yep.
I'm Meredith Nichols. I work for Transform Co. Yeah. So we're Sears. We used to be Sears Holdings. I am the reputation management specialist. I also work with direct engagement. So essentially it's Facebook, Twitter, Google, and Yelp. And much like you said, it's just about everything you can imagine from the human race. Hater stories, there's a lot. And one of my favorites, though, is that we do have people who will post every day on Twitter, almost like a countdown. So I will come in and I'll be like, "So it's day 14. Have we heard from Bob?" Okay, just making sure. But yeah, so I mean, there's a lot. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rick. I'm from Kellogg. I used to help run social media at McDonald's, and so McDonald's being a global brand sometimes can be a target for haters as well. I'll try to make it quick with two stories. My favorite one, we also had an animal activist group come after us. In fact, at a conference in New York, I had somebody rush me on stage to read their manifesto because they were filming and they wanted to get in the live streaming on the social feed. And then I saw another person from that group at a conference 3 months later sitting next to me playing Angry Birds on his phone. And I'm like, you're supposed to be defending animals, not playing video games that killed them. But anyhow. But another one that I dealt with was one of the early versions in the media world of the Twitter freaks out headlines. And so we had a hashtag that we were promoting, and some comedians decided to take the hashtag in a different direction. We stopped promotion on that hashtag, and the conversation was going like this. We stopped promotion, it went like this. At the end of the day, we went and we did our analysis and saw that we had 70,000 mentions of the hashtag, and there were 2,000 that were negative. And we're like, hey, you know what? That's less than 10% negative, which in our world at the time was pretty good. But then we started seeing media coverage, and it was Twitter freaks out at McDonald's over X. And it just kept going and going and going. And then the media reaction, the media stories that were nothing more than screenshots of 5 angry tweets became the story, which was actually not an accurate representation of the story at all. And so that became a bigger PR issue than the stupid hashtag ever was. So that's my hater story, which we'll talk more about later.
Cool. Okay. So thank you. And next, let's talk a little bit about rules of engagement. You mentioned some of them, you know, going and just mentioning the real story and just ignoring people. I'd love to hear from a few of you about your company rules of engagement, about a couple things: when to engage, when not to engage, and maybe Daliah can pop into when to let legal handle it, and we'll go from there. So who'd like to get started?
I can talk a little bit about that. So we define our rules of engagement really on a campaign-by-campaign basis, and I think that a really helpful way that we have articulated it for a number of past clients is with a traffic light analogy. So we have some certain topics that are always red light, do not engage, do not feed the trolls, things like politics, things like religion, like major news events that are very controversial. So we try to steer clear of those in general. It's usually a danger zone. And then we've got the yellow light category. So these are areas where it could potentially get controversial, it could get dangerous for the brand, and so it's proceed cautiously, and we define what those are within the context of whatever the campaign is that we're planning. And then there's the green light. So you always want to engage with your social media lovers. You really want to talk to your advocates. You want to keep nurturing those advocates who are speaking so positively about your brand. So that's kind of our red, yellow, green light analogy that we use a lot to kind of set the standard for what the rules are to engage.
We do a similar thing at Kellogg, and we have, across our brands, we have 80 different social channels that we're managing. So, Fruit Loops, Pop-Tarts, Pringles, Cheez-Its, and the audiences for those brands are very, very different as well. One thing I would add to that, though, because the traffic light analogy is great, you need to plan for that. Also think about how you're managing that on Facebook in terms of the actual moderation, because you can leave a comment, you can reply to it, you can delete it, or you can hide it. And so we actually take great care in terms of what do we delete and what do we hide, because it's a different way, and it also sends a different signal in terms of how you're managing your overall page and community.
I'll be the lawyer. So when I counsel clients, the first question is this something that just makes you feel bad? Or is it something that's actually damaging to your organization because it contains false information? So if it's, I tasted your cat food and it tasted bad, why isn't it tasty for humans? Like, you obviously don't care about that because it's A, stupid, and B, it's not really a false statement. It's not like...
Stupid's a legal term?
Right, right. But if it's like, I gave your cat food to my cat and she died because it contains poison, that's a problem. So that's a verifiably false statement of fact, and you have to do something about it, whether it's to respond, of course, but depending on how widespread and how credible the source of that statement is, if it's just a crazy person who has 70 reviews of crazy things, but if it's a viable source, then you want to immediately act. In most states, you only have 1 year from when the post was made to actually file a lawsuit. I have a lot of clients who are like, we didn't care about this because, she was the crazy cat lady and she posted about this. But now 2 years later, Google's algorithms changed and it is the top post on every search engine. Daliah, get it down. And then I'll say, I can't. It's too late. If the law says that if it didn't hurt you for the first year, you probably don't have a reason to do anything now. So I can go into more detail about that, but really when you're deciding, the first question is it just an opinion and you need to manage it, or is it a false statement that you need to immediately address because it could cause bigger problems later?
And with us, we also run our home services division. So we're Sears Home Services, Kmart, Shop Your Way, Craftsman, Kenmore. So a lot of it for us, we have to be reactive to it because we have people who are, my tech didn't show up, my refrigerator still isn't working, I've had my washer has blown up with pictures, and these are things that we get on right away. So for us, we try to respond to just about everything so people know that we're there and we're there. We hear your problems. If we need to, we can move on it. If, like you said, you're tweeting about your cat, or we had a woman who talked in the third person for 3 days. Those, we just kind of let them have their way because Barb doesn't need her monies.
And here's a follow-up question. Thoughts on deleting comments?
For us, we don't delete them. We don't delete them because people have a right to say what they're gonna say. And for the most part, if you're deleting comments, people see that the comments are deleted and you're poking the bear. Hiding comments are a great thing because hiding comments, the person who made it can still see it. The brand can still see it, everyone else can't see it. We do that when personal information is given out either by the consumer or if they're giving out our personal information, my physical name, not so much the CEO, but someone that they can physically reach and do something with. We do hide those.
Good.
But other than that, it's poking the bear.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because the other thing about deleting comments is that it just opens the door for a First Amendment argument from people who are not lawyers. And it's just, it just gives them a whole new platform to be angry over.
Hiding's a great idea. I hadn't thought of that. Thanks for sharing that. So, anyone else delete or not? Anyone delete comments? No. Any one of you delete comments? Yeah, I'm seeing some raised hands. Okay, good.
Maybe not right at that time, but this kind of like notion of maybe preservation a little bit of what's out there, and certainly agree with kind of that hiding of comments, but revisiting this later as an archive that now you can put some editing to achieve the goal that you want, I think is certainly a reasonable tactic, and that could involve deleting those comments.
Okay, good. So next question. Sometimes brands mess up. It just happens. There's been some examples of kind of tasteless tweets because the brands are trying to hop on a topic and they don't do it well, or just something bad happens with the brand. So how have you handled the social media backlash that was a result of a company fumble?
So I can talk about this one, and I know that when we had chatted all before we did this panel, one of the examples I brought up, and does anyone work for DiGiorno in here? Okay, so an example that, and this is not a brand that I've worked on, but I think it's really important for brands when they're activating, especially when they're real-time activating, is to really be mindful and do their research so that they're not stepping into a cultural blind spot. And so the example that I've shared previously as a watch out is that hashtag Why I Stayed started trending on Twitter as a mechanism for women to share domestic violence stories. And they were talking about why it was difficult for them to leave their abuser, and often women get blamed for not being able to leave their abuser. And so hashtag Why I Stayed was their ability to be able to explain why it wasn't as easy as people think. Well, DiGiorno tweeted something along the lines of hashtag Why I Stayed because they had pizza. And it's obviously a very, tasteless reaction to something that was a very powerful way and a very vulnerable way for women to share these stories. And so I think that for brands, it's really important that we're doing our research so that we can anticipate and know what we're stepping into when we're being real time and when we're being agile and activating on those opportunities. So you don't have to put your foot in your mouth and accidentally be very insensitive.
One thing that I would point out from when I was at McDonald's, our Twitter volume, just grew exponentially every year, it seemed, and we hit a point where it felt like we were tweeting to consumers we could have tweeted every minute. Not every minute, but very frequently, that, sorry about that. Sorry your order got messed up at the drive-thru. Here's the number. Call our customer service number. We'll take care of it. And we didn't want the Twitter feed to be overtaken by just customer service issues. And even if we could get to 99.9% accuracy in the restaurants, there'd still be dozens of customers every day whose order just gets messed up. That's just the volume issue. And so we created a dedicated customer service Twitter handle, which a lot of organizations have done now, specifically to get after those issues. And then that allowed us to start to push people over here where, if you've got general issues, questions, things about contests, we're over here. If you want to talk to somebody because your order got messed up, come over here. And that helped us create different workflows to be able to address issues, valid customer issues when we messed up.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
We've had some restaurant clients that may have mistakenly, in retrospect, changed menu items or taken some things off without doing a due diligence to figure out whether that was a smart move. And then of course, social media blows up. I can't believe you got rid of this sauce or whatever it was. Where we see that reaction enough and go, you know what, that should probably be reintroduced. But then using social as a way to say, hey, if you feel passionately about this, here's a poll, right? Mm-hmm. And it actually, we already knew we were going to bring it back, but now make everyone feel like they were really empowered for doing that, and creates even more buzz. So
love that. That's great. Cool. Good. So with employees being easier to reach than ever, and we alluded a little bit to this in a couple of the intro stories, what kind of policies and communications plan does your company have in place to keep employees not only on top of on top of what's going on, but then to give them guidelines about how to respond or how not to respond? And you look like you're nodding a lot. Do you have some?
Yes. Well, I get asked about social media policies all the time and what should they be, and then companies pay lawyers lots of money, and then everybody gets this big fat book of rules. And how many of you have actually read your social media policies? Maybe some of you have to. But the large majority of employees at companies end up signing the last page and returning it, and then it just sits in a drawer. So I'm a big advocate of, yes, have the policies because you need to legally, but also have a day where you just go in and say, all right, this is what is copyright infringement. This is right of publicity law. This is advocating for something that you shouldn't. This is all these FTC guidelines, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And just having education be the driving force of what employees should and should not do, not a document that you have to have and you sign and then you don't really refer to.
I think from a crisis management situations that whether kind of predetermined as a policy or not, like communication internally, even if offline, off social, is absolutely critical. You know, in every situation, there's multiple messages that you need to communicate simultaneously to different audiences. And if you lose sight of that and are just thinking like, we need to make sure Barb on Twitter like is not gonna freak out anymore, that's, you know, different than how do we make sure that the people in the company that are feeling as if their company is being totally attacked, rightly or wrongly, understand what's going on, and that kind of status update to them and clarity of purpose and mission is perhaps even more important, in my opinion, rather than that kind of public defense. Like, if you value your business and your employees and your work culture, like, you got to lock that down very, very quickly and ensure, you know, build on the trust that hopefully you have, that we are handling this in the way, because those employees, if they feel as if what they're doing is being attacked in the way that the brand is being attacked, now, you know, those haters are actually getting into the foundation and can really ruin the business.
When we revamped our social media policy a couple years ago, we also did a online and in-person training sessions for the entire organization, and we made it part of our orientation as well. And I said it as a joke one time, but then it became part of the curriculum. I said, all right, we can make this about a 30-second session. If you wouldn't say it to your mom, or you wouldn't say it to your boss's face, then don't say it online. Okay, good? All right, have a nice day, everybody, let's go. Because that literally comes down to, you can write a one-pager that's in plain English, you can write a 4-page document that's in legalese. In any situation, that's the thing that the employees just need to understand. And most people get that, but a lot of people forget it too, which is unfortunate.
The bigger problem with brands is that employees tend to be your advocates and your evangelists. And if you allow them to do that evangelizing on their own accounts, it necessarily creates problems later, right? Because you're working for Coke one day, then you go and work for a competitor or a different beverage company the next day, and it's confusing because if you're advocating for your company today and now you're at a different company tomorrow, what's happening?
Yes.
Also, you don't want to be investing in accumulating eyeballs and building these online assets and have them be in disparate places based on where your employees are doing that kind of work. So our big thing as part of our education is you have corporate accounts, you have rules about who posts where and when, and you accumulate those followers and those comments on corporate sanctioned accounts that are owned by the entity. Otherwise, you need to have employees sign essentially what is an endorsement agreement. If you hire Bob because he's got a great social media following and you think he'd be an asset to you, then you have to have kind of an endorsement deal for this, but like and now it's an influencer deal. But if they're also your employees, you treat them like you would an influencer, and you have to have documents in place that say, if you leave, you will then not say this, or you will not take these people, or whatever it might be. And it's a hard concept because you think, you know, an employee is not an influencer, but especially in these types of companies, they may well be both.
Well, I agree, but I'm going to disagree a little bit with you there. Employees are influencers, even if their networks are like 50 people, because of their subject matter expertise. But the value of having employees speak on behalf of your brand is that they're going to be able to get into networks of friends that, and in some ways, hopefully counterbalance a little bit of the organic hatchet job that's happened on some of our main channels. You know, I could probably reach as many people if I had 100 employees posting about something on Facebook if I did through our main Facebook channel, because just the way that Facebook literally penalizes, not penalizes is the wrong word, but like the way that Facebook
Algorithms.
Yeah, the algorithms, but I'm trying to think of what's the opposite of penalize. It rewards people talking to people versus brands talking to people. In that way. There's also a tool that's really that's really helpful for this. There's a company called Dynamic Signal. It's based here in Chicago. They have an employee advocacy platform where at its base level, it's an app and a news feed that employees of the company can get into. And then once they have that, that's pre-approved content from various topic areas. So that as an employee, you don't need to wonder, can I repost this? Is this good or bad? Someone else has already curated that for you. Now, again, because there's a lawyer on the panel, I'm on the advisory board for Dynamic Signal, so I have to disclose that. There's also competitive product from LinkedIn called LinkedIn Elevate, but those are both really good solutions to help kind of clear up some of those muddy waters around disclosure and just permission to repost things.
So we have more questions on our list, but I wanted to throw this out there to all of you. We do have time, so we have about 20 more minutes, so we have lots of time. But let's take some audience questions. Lynn?
I'm very curious about rules and regulations about employees being given confidential information internally, and to what extent they're putting it outside on social media. I'd be curious to hear from you who are working in corporations. Do you make your employees sign non-disclosure agreements? I will not post on social media. I will not post confidential information, because this is a huge issue, whereas internal communications used to be internal, now it's internal plus external via social. Everybody get that question?
I got
I think
it.
it depends, and it depends on the
Lawyer
cli-
answer, you know what that's going to be.
Well, I was going to say it depends a little bit on the client. So I know that there are varying levels of confidentiality expectations by clients. So, for example, I've worked with a tech company previously, and they had the highest level that I've ever experienced before. I had to sign an additional NDA when I worked for this client, because obviously they want to prevent leaks, they want to prevent other companies stealing their IP and things like that. So I think it from the agency side, it depends client by client. Obviously, the expectation is that, well, I'm not sharing things like things that are confidential for the clients that I'm working on. So information about, formulation changes or product launches and things like that. And we do, whenever we contract third parties, for example, if we're working with outside vendors or influencers, we NDA them as well.
Great. Cool. I saw another one back there.
Yep. Hi. What's your advice for like small business owners or like restaurant owners when it comes to Yelp and getting negative comments on there? Do you respond directly on Yelp to them? Do you reach out personally and directly to some of those consumers and entice them to take it down? Or what would your recommendations be?
Yelp's the worst.
And
Run. Honestly, they're getting more frustrated as a company because Google reviews, and there's so many other platforms for reviews, and so Yelp's becoming less and less relevant, I think. Doesn't mean that it's not harmful, right? So you do have to go through the same channels. Good luck trying to reach them. In fact, I've seen clients that, hire a lawyer and they send, like, if you don't take it down, I'll sue you. And then Yelp loves that. And then they post that letter up and they're like, see, this person's trying to stifle.
Have you ever seen Shameless? No, I'm kidding. There's a really good Yelp one in there. No.
Yeah. No, I mean, it is a problem, but it's the same issue. So certainly if you want to figure out who wrote the post, you can go through the legal channels and get the IP address if they did it from somewhere traceable, and then you go after the person who wrote the post. There are tools that you can comment like any other platform on Yelp to clarify that it's not an accurate review, but generally, like any other platform, the more positive reviews, the more activity you have online, the better, and it will mitigate any harm done by a bad review on Yelp.
I think something to keep in mind too, and something that we are continually having conversations about with our clients is the criticism warranted? So there are certainly times where people like to fire off insults because it's fun to bash a brand online, and then it gets bandwagoners who want to bash that same brand too. But I think that it's important to consider, is it warranted? Is this legitimate criticism or feedback on an experience that someone had with my company? And I think for small business owners in particular, I think that a lot of small business owners want to or hope to be able to take a more hands-on approach with being able to respond to that, which I think can go really far in terms of making sure that people feel like they have a better experience next time, or making sure people feel like they're heard in terms of the criticism that they've offered of the company. And so I can say for myself as a consumer, I appreciate it if I try to reserve my negative reviews as someone who works on the triaging negative community management side. I try to reserve a negative review for a particularly negative case where I feel like I wasn't able to be heard in another channel. But in those cases where I have posted a negative review, I do appreciate when there's a personal outreach attached to it. It makes me more likely to give that company a second chance.
I appreciate you appreciating that, being the person who does that.
I try.
We do respond to all of the negative reviews, even if it's just a rating. We want to know what we did wrong. We want to know if you're just leaving us a 1-star, we literally have something that says, hey, send us an email. Tell us more about this. What happened? How can we fix this? You know, it's letting other people know that, yeah, we've got this bad review, but here, we're going to try and fix it. And we're going to try and see it out. And like you said, even if it's unwarranted, then you're still responding, because then you're saying, okay, you know it's unwarranted, I know it's unwarranted, but this person feels like it's a legitimate complaint.
And we hear you.
Right.
Yeah.
We hear you. We hear what you're saying. We're sorry that this happened. You know, even if you're just telling them, you know, we're going to work to make this better for you, it goes miles.
Unless it's someone that's a competitor or a disgruntled ex-employee.
Yes.
And then that's a different thing that you need to go. I mean, you track, like how many other reviews does this person have? What IP address is it coming from? How many of them have they posted? And that's when you'll see that the platforms will be more receptive. If you can show that it's a false review and that the person was never a consumer or a customer, you might have some traction in getting that removed by the platform.
There's a kind of irony, really, with, I think, in the restaurant space anyway. Like, you know, Rick was talking about a little bit of, if you remove the anonymity of what you want to say, would you say it to your mom? Would you say it to your boss, right? You're less likely to say it to somebody's face. Everybody's kind of familiar with this, right? But in terms of restaurant reviews, think about that history of the anonymous critic that would come into the restaurant. I mean, Phil Vitale from the Tribune only just kind of recently outed himself. So restaurants were always dealing with that anyway and didn't have, you know, a direct way to kind of respond to a 1-star review by a professional food critic whom they didn't know, right? It existed on a controlled platform that not everybody had access to before in the form of a newspaper, right? So it's not new things that they have to deal with. It's just kind of new techniques. And I think if you go back to intention, like you were saying, of we want to get better, tell us how to do this, and balance that against, like, don't freak out that, oh my gosh, you got a bad review. You know, there's balance in all of that. And you know, if you've worked with chefs and restaurateurs, there's a lot of ego involved often, and so there's fragility there, right? And so how do you kind of, you know, on the behalf of the marketing team or an agency or whatever, kind of manage that in the broader context of, you know what, a lot of people don't give a shit what this person just put on Yelp, that kind of thing.
So I'm glad you asked that question, because I have a kind of a follow-up question. Who has turned a complete hater and a bad review into your biggest advocate? Or Dakota, you said you made a good point about how it helped to shape the direction. So who else has a story about that?
I have a food-related story for that, actually. So I was working with a company in Chicago that was opening up a new coffee shop, and as part of the opening, the support that we were providing, we were listening for conversations, people mentioning this company. And so we saw one woman mention the company, and she was so excited, and she couldn't wait to come in. Opening day she came into the shop and realized that the to-go offerings of the shop were not very robust. There was only like 1 or 2. And she was really mad that she came in and didn't have a lot of variety of options that she could pick from. She ended up picking one anyway, and she posted that she was annoyed about it. A couple hours later, she posted how she was even more annoyed about it because she kept stewing about how mad she was. She had to, you know, pick an option that she didn't like, and she was so, you know, pissed that she was excited previously and then didn't have the option she thought she would. So as the community management agency, we flagged that to the clients and suggested to them that they reach out to her directly, see if we could flip her back into an advocate, from a badvocate to advocate, and see if they could reach out to her and if a personal message would be helpful. And it was. So the next thing that she tweeted was, you know, company, never leave my life again. Thank you so much. My office coffee tastes like Ajax and despair. I'll never desert you. So she was flipped, and she was a convert again. So I think that it goes to show the power of actually reaching out and being willing to talk to your haters, if you have that ability, if it's a small enough scale, so that you could potentially reconvert them back.
I think there's a way too to also use the negative feedback that you get from one impassioned individual and leverage that to actually amplify the positive feelings that your other fans have for you already. You know, we saw that a lot in the Crazy Cat story, right? Where our fans really came to our defense in a very impassioned way, and I think genuinely felt better about their affinity to what we were doing. And then additionally to that, like after we had gotten that kind of all under control, we didn't just kind of deal with the crisis situation, we kind of extended it as far as we could. And the very last thing that we did was we held a fundraiser and we put it out to all of the haters saying, hey, come to the racetrack, and if you bring a can of cat food, right, you get free admission and a program and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, it was mostly our fans that really delivered on bringing a bunch of food that ultimately helped the cats and all that. And it was kind of like, where was everybody that said that they were all about the cats and they never showed up? But I know that there were other people within that community that had initial outrage that then when they kind of understood and they came back and that very like, oh, I didn't realize there were two sides to the story. It was like, because you're 3? Like, you know? And so then they were there, and I don't know that they became huge racing fans, but at least they appreciated what a family business was doing.
So I've got an example, and this is not one that I worked on, but a friend of mine, he actually told me the other day, he's like, oh, I got my first tweet from a big brand. And he's telling me that he tweeted to United because he travels a lot. He's on United, but not all the time. They used to serve Stroop waffles with coffee, and they got rid of them for a while, and then they brought them back. And he tweeted a couple months ago, like, why'd you get rid of the Stroop waffles, you bastards? They replied to him and say, hey, Tom, you'll be happy to know Stroop waffles are back. And now, I don't think that his tweet caused them to bring the Stroop waffles back, but the fact that they went back through their Twitter feed to say, hey, whoever, criticized them for that before. And so he's like, hey, thanks, United. It makes me feel great as a customer that they did that. So, just what I thought was really cool about that is that they took something that was a business move that they were going to make anyway, and looked back to their haters for an opportunity to turn it into a positive story.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, thank you. I think that's that's it. If there are any last minute burning questions before we have lunch. Oh wow, two burning questions. Go ahead.
So how do you guys flush out and balance those consumers that just are out to get free shit?
Oh.
You know?
Oh.
Send them to our coupon site.
You really do learn. We've, from a lot of this comes from my home services, working that part, but you see everything, and you can learn, you'll learn to figure out, okay, wait a second. So you're telling me that this happened and you need this ordered, but you don't have anyone coming out to fix it. Okay, no. But there are people who come up with these exorbitant stories, then you're just like, wait a second. And if you don't say it to your things that you wouldn't say, you really have to look into it further and go, okay, this person just wants money. This person, a lot of times they'll be like, well, how are you going to compensate me? And I'll be like, well, for that 5 minutes, maybe $1. So it's a lot of it. There's a lot of people who you'll come through and you'll learn to see that the people with legitimate problems aren't concerned about compensation. They're concerned about getting their problem solved. And the people who want something out of it are more concerned about getting, what are you going to do for me after this is solved? At least that's what I've learned.
Mm-hmm. Cool. We can take a couple more. It seems like there's a lot of interest. So go ahead.
She asked if anyone has implemented chatbots because a lot of brands are concerned about trolling. I actually have implemented a chatbot before, and it wasn't necessarily as a response to people trolling the brand, but it was meant to actually fix an issue with the brand's website, but rather than rebuild the website, the cheaper solve was actually to implement a chatbot, which would make the website easier to search. And we saw great results from it by giving people easier search mechanisms through a Facebook chatbot. They spent, I think it was 4 times longer on the website versus previously the bounce rate for the website was really high because people just weren't finding what they were able to see. But I think your question, if I could answer the other side of your question about concern over trolling, I think that something that we've done at Digitas is asking our creative teams as a part of our creative concepting process to kind of tap into their troll mentality when planning out content, because I think that it's important, and I think a lot of brands don't often kind of want to have blinders to what could possibly go wrong at times, because there's usually so much belief in the product or in the message or in the ad. But I think it's important that we plan for the worst case possible scenario. And so we often encourage our creative teams and even our clients to put in your troll mentality and think about, how could anyone possibly misinterpret this? How could a 14-year-old boy misinterpret this and put a sexual innuendo in it? How could, PETA people misinterpret this and say that we hate animals? How could your grandma misinterpret this because she doesn't maybe understand what we're asking consumers to do? So I think that having that troll mentality is actually really helpful tool to be able to anticipate and then prevent any missteps from the brand side when you're ideating.
Yeah, I've done those negative brainstorms, or hater sessions we call them, and they're actually kind of fun.
Yeah,
They are.
In a perverse way.
You have to think about yourself in your most angry state. Like I call it when I call Comcast. So I think about myself like that, and I think about every possible situation that could set me off in a heartbeat, and that's kind of where I go from there. Well, if I say this, they're going to come back with this because that's what I would have done. So, but to go off what you said, a lot of times, a lot of forethought. We had someone come through yesterday that was complaining that Kmart was selling a pool float that looked like a swastika. But it didn't. It was literally a little swirly thing that just kind of went around, and that was our big thing yesterday. So, yeah, I mean, because really and truly, the people, and here's where the people took care of it for us.
Yeah.
Because it was so outlandish that people were going, "Are you crazy? Where do you see this?" So it really, in this case, it took care of itself.
I would love to know the legal side of this a little bit in terms of the responses put out publicly by a chat bot. Like, who it was the robot said it, right? We're not.
Ooh, that would have been great for us when the hurricanes went down.
Sure.
As in, well, where's the source? So it's not, the medium doesn't change the law, and I always say this. So defamation law is defamation law. Whether it's posted via a robot, but you wrote the script to make the robot say that, or you said it, then they don't care. The focus is on the statement. Where was it made? When was it made? How was it published? And what was the impact of that publication? There is now this concept of context, and context is a really big part of these cases, because if I post a false statement about Sears or whatever, any brand, on The Onion, the person reading it understands that The Onion is not a source of real news. Of course, setting aside the whole fake news problem.
Neither is CNN.
But But that's something you would argue. This part of the CNN is an op-ed column, and no one believes that this is clearly the opinion of the person who contributed. And so you litigate context. There's this concept of rhetorical hyperbole, which is if it's really, that doctor murders babies,
Kills cats.
right, or whatever. That's if it's an abortion clinic, right? So that's rhetorical hyperbole. No one believes that there is an actual, not good example, but you get it. Like, so you can distinguish if a consumer or a person can distinguish that statement from an actual factual statement as opposed to just this outlandish rhetorical hyperbole. It might not be actionable. So you fight about that. This is clearly a chat box. It's a stock statement. No one believes it's a human being who made that statement. Disregard, etc.
I think about that context too, not necessarily from the legal standpoint, but in terms of the communication. Like, if you can put yourself into that person's shoes, and not just the kind of the fun aspect of sarcasm in a troll and all that, but when people lose control or lack control, they retreat to their tribes, right? And you find access to your tribe so much more easily now online than you could have before. So within that becomes an immediate amplification and gaslighting of everything that's there. But if you can kind of see beyond some of that remark right away, you might have a better opportunity to diffuse some of that.
Cool, good. Well, thank you. I'm thinking that this is wonderful. Let's give them all a big round of applause. This was fantastic.